Welcome back to Up North Kitchen. Today we're making beef stroganoff, but I'm going to use Texas doll sheep from our hunt, which the video can be linked right there. So we're going to go ahead and start our noodles boiling. So we're going to start with our sauce, but I'm going to first show you the ingredients we have, and this is 1 pound of Texas doll sheep meat, but you can use any kind of red meat, and I would probably recommend like probably a more tender cut of meat. And I don't use ground meat, as you can see here, for my stroganoff because I just think it's better with tips. Here I have an 8-ounce package of baby bella mushrooms that we have sliced, or you can get pre-sliced. 2 tablespoons of, or is that 1 tablespoon? 1 tablespoon of minced garlic. 2 tablespoons of butter here and here. And I have 3 tablespoons of beef base. And this is 4 tablespoons of cornstarch. And we're going to add water to that to make a slurry. This is 1 cup of sour cream and 1 quart of water. So, now I'm going to make some sauce. First thing though, move that over. You're going to take your water and you're going to add your beef base to it. Oh gosh, I thought I was going to make a huge ploop, but I didn't. Take your whisk. Decide which whisk you want to use. It's like choosing a weapon, but more important. Get rid of your spatula, even though you're going to need that again. And whiskey until you make that into a pretty uniform liquid. And that'll be your beef broth. And then we'll start the sauce. Okay, so now you're going to get your Sauté pan heating on high heat. And you're going to add your 2 tablespoons of butter. And once that's fully melted, we'll add the minced garlic and the mushrooms. Okay, now that that's melted, we're going to add the garlic and the mushrooms. Whoops. Now that's going to look like your pan's a little too full, but those mushrooms will break down, they'll soften, and they'll get smaller. Okay, now that the mushrooms are done, you're going to take and just dump those into a separate bowl. Keep your pan and keep the, turn the wrong burner off. Well, keep the burner on anyway. And then you're going to add, your next 2 tablespoons of butter and just get it melted. And we're not going to add our meat just yet, but you do want to get your butter melted. I guess you don't need to do that now, but it's always nice to stay a step ahead so you don't have to worry about it later. You're going to turn your sauce pot, or however big of a pan you want to use, on high. And then you're going to, let that heat up a little bit, give your beef base or beef broth another little stir. And then you're going to add that to your pan. And I always try to use a little bit bigger pan than you need, just because it takes a lot less time to prepare your dish. And you got beef base on your hand. You gotta let that come to a boil before the next step. Okay, and once that beef broth comes to a boil, you're gonna add your 1 cup of sour cream. And before you do anything else, you just want to make sure that gets evenly mixed in. It's going to look kind of gross and chunky at first, but it will eventually come together. And when you see some of those chunks still floating around, you can leave it boil for a minute, and those will start to dissolve. While we let that boil, we're going to add just a little bit of water, and you can always add more water than you need, but to your cornstarch. And just whisk it up, and you want it to be kind of like pretty much milk texture or thickness. And that's pretty much good right there. Don't add it just yet though, just set it aside. And you want this to come to a complete boil again before you add that to it. And if I didn't mention before, we are not going to show the boiling of the pasta because, I'm hoping you can boil pasta. Okay, so I think that's boiling enough. Now we're going to just make sure you give your cornstarch slurry another stir before you add it. And dump it in. I'd say about half of it to start. You can do it all if you want, but I would usually just start with half, just to be safe. Make sure you whisk it nicely and let it come back to a boil again. And you can already see on the edges it's starting to boil a little thicker. Okay, we're going to go ahead and add just the rest of that. Oh, we're not going to drop our whisk into the sauce. Make sure you stir it again just to make sure you get it all out. And just add the rest of the cornstarch slurry. Set that aside and immediately start whisking. If you just left that sit, it'll just form a big jellied ball on the bottom of your pan, then burn, and then you've got nasty burnt jelly in your sauce. Okay, now let that boil for just a few minutes. I mean, not even a few minutes, just a few, maybe 30 seconds to a minute and a half. Okay, I think we've thoroughly activated our cornstarch slurry. Now we're going to take our mushrooms and garlic and all the juice that was in the pan, dump that right into our sauce, mix that in. Now, if you have someone at home who doesn't like mushrooms or garlic, you could always just leave those separate. But now that you've done that, turn it off, and we will end up reboiling it after everything is done, just to give it an extra moment to thicken. Okay, now we're going to get our saute pan heating on high again with that butter in there. And I'm just going to add just a very light drizzle of olive oil, or vegetable oil, or anything else, just to kind of raise that flash point of the butter. Just a little bit. You're going to let that butter get hot. Okay, I'm seeing some movement in there now, so we're going to add the meat to the pan. And you should hear a sizzle when you put it in. Spread the meat out evenly. And then salt and pepper to taste. I am a generous salter and pepperer. So, to each their own. This is also a point where you could add, for certain people out there, I know they like this recipe a lot, you could add your Cajun seasoning to this. This is where you would add that. Season to taste with that as well. Okay, when your sheep or your beef is about halfway cooked or almost all the way cooked, you'll turn your sauce back on again and bring it back to a boil. And it should have, because it stopped cooking and then started cooking again, it should have thickened even more. Once it brings itself to a boil again, it will be there. And if at this point, if it's not thick enough for your liking, by all means you can make more cornstarch slurry and add it. But I recommend you go very little by little at this point because it'll just exponentially thicken. And then soon you'll have beef jelly. And the meat, you really just want to cook it to your own liking. I usually go to about medium or so with a sauce dish like this. And I'm going to say that that's all probably done. So we'll turn that off. And sometimes I like to mix the meat in with the sauce, but it depends. At home, if you have somebody who doesn't like the meat with the sauce or doesn't like the meat you're using, you can keep it on the side and add it at the end. And the meat probably only takes around, I'd say, 2.5 to maybe 5 minutes, depending on how much meat you have. You can always test it by taste testing a piece of meat, which I enjoy that part. Okay, I think we're gonna call that done, and we're ready to dish it up. Okay, now you're gonna try to make sure you get some mushrooms in there. Take a scoop of your sauce and just put that right in there. Now generously sauce this, because why wouldn't you? Why I chose this spoon, I have no idea, but I chose it. But just another couple scoops, because this spoon is ridiculous. Okay, we're still giving scoops because, again, the spoon. Okay, that's probably good. And last, you're going to take your meat and place that right on top. However much you like to add. And voila! Done. Okay, so here it is. You want to make sure you get a little bit of everything, mushroom and meat and noodle. I'm struggling. Okay. So, it's super beefy. I mean, all over the place. The sheep is excellent with it, I will say, if you have the opportunity at Texas Doll Sheep. The mushrooms, the baby bellas are just excellent with this. The sauce is like almost, it's on that point of like almost too salty, but just with the noodles and everything else, it just all comes together so well. And yeah, it's a couple of my friends' favorite dish of mine, and it is very good, and you should definitely try it. Super easy, and by all means, you know, if you like more sour cream or more of something or less of something, by all means change the recipe up. But this is the recipe. I hope you enjoyed it. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Follow us on Instagram, and yeah, we'll see you next time. You don't want the sizzling B-roll?